Welcome to Next in Tech, an S&P Global Market Intelligence podcast where the world of emerging tech lives. I'm your host, Eric Hanselman, Chief Analyst for the 451 Research arm of S&P Global Market Intelligence. And today, we're going to be discussing augmented reality and virtual reality with returning guest, Ian Hughes. Ian, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. It's very, very good to be here. Thank you for inviting me again.
Well, great to have you back and to go to the next level for some of the conversations that we've been having. We've been talking about everything from metaverses and a lot of the aspects of sort of overall virtualization. But I wanted to go dig into some of the actual implementation aspects and talk about augmented reality, virtual reality. We're just in the pre-meet. We're talking about the extensions of mixed reality. And maybe let's start off with just a discussion of what are they, how are they different, how are they getting used, and what are the different pieces that are coming into play for each of these. So AR and VR sometimes get used interchangeably, but they're pretty distinct.
They are distinct, and the AR/VR tag is something that I've often changed documents to try and split the words out, but they do sit in a similar field. But augmented reality is about primarily taking your current view of the world, the one that you're seeing with your eyes as you are at the moment, and adding information to that and adding data to that view. And virtual reality is completely removing your view of the world and giving you something that you wouldn't be seeing and you wouldn't be hearing and you wouldn't be feeling in any other way other than that virtual reality. And so then that's why we get the term mixed reality sometimes, because there is a kind of crossover, even though I've just said I want to keep them separate, that if you imagine you're replacing some of the view of your world for augmented reality, if you replace all of your view of the world, because there's so much data, you've kind of dropped into virtual reality. So it's a very similar world.
There's a middle ground, like with many things that start to cross over when you get a little bit more to one end versus a little bit more of the other. And I guess when we think about what happens with the devices that are actually used for both, there's crossover in both directions as well.
There is, because augmented reality's kind of we're in smart glass territory and smart helmet territory, if you like. There's all sorts of other ways of doing augmented reality, but we'll kind of stick with those because that's what people are used to, putting something on your head. And a lot of those are involving clever ways to refract images onto lenses so that they appear to be in front of you, and maybe tracking your head movement so that the thing that you're looking at will stay where it should be in the physical world. That's kind of the ultimate trick of augmented reality. And then virtual reality is basically just slapping two screens over your eyes and rendering everything into those screens and tracking the movement of your head. But virtual reality doesn't have to necessarily understand what's going on in the world around it. But augmented reality ideally does. But there are crossovers where there are devices that use cameras to do a view of the world, but then project that onto screens. So you're actually seeing the real world, but as a screen view, which then augmented reality things are then put on top of that. So that's a kind of crossover in doing this outside-in video approach. And some of the commercial and consumer headsets for VR have a kind of button you press so you can see a camera views it out of the world, so you can see what's going on. Because obviously when you put a VR headset on and replace everything, then you can't see your coffee to pick it up and drink it.
Well, it's that classic example of somebody with a VR headset on sort of crashing through a living room, not being able to see the physical world.
Yes.
But we're in that sort of transition of, there's the Halo kind of headset in which you've got a wraparound visor that has your augmented capability projected onto it. But it's transparent enough so that you're actually seeing through it, and that's actually extending out to even fairly everyday kind of capabilities. We've now got a fairly broad ecosystem of fitness trackers that are taking that sort of what was the the augmented reality glasses, the Google Glass and those sorts of things that were giving you small little bits and pieces, but now doing things like giving your projecting your heart rate onto your glasses while you're exercising, your step rate, whatever the particular statistics are that you want, fairly, I don't know, I guess fairly simple representations. But when you then sort of step into that crossover, you now have, the more augmentation you do, the more, the closer you wind up getting to the virtual reality, and that tends to bleed over in both directions. So
it does.
Interesting that we're getting to that point.
It does, and those things that you mentioned there about the fitness trackers, some elements of AR really are just a heads-up display. The sort of things that you see you see heads-up display in games all the time, and the sort of thing that you see maybe fighter pilots using in movies and in real life if you happen to hang around with fighter pilots. But there's the projection of some additional information into your field of view that whichever way you look, you see that piece. So if you're riding a bike or swimming in a pool or whatever, that is an augmented reality, but that's like a speedo on a car that you can see wherever you look. But then there's the kind of higher end augmented reality, which, as I mentioned before, is understanding the world around it. So it's constantly scanning the world. It knows where flat surfaces are, how far something is away, so that it can then deliver information and models usually of things into that view as if that object was actually there. So if you put an object on the table and you look away from it, it doesn't follow you. It stays on. It's virtually on the table. So when you turn your head and look again, it's still there. And that's a much higher end of AR than being able to just, not just because it's still good, but just project information. So you often get the kind of smart glasses and monocular systems that are giving you engineering information or giving you manual information so you can read something with your hands free. But that stays, you always see it. It's not pinned to the physical world. But so when you get to these richer things, then they become static, if you like, if you need them to be, and pinned to a physical location.
Well, you mentioned heads-up displays for airplanes. Commercial aircraft have heads-up displays that allow them to land in low visibility, and there, it is pinned to that reality. You're getting a view of the runway that's, that fortunately enough is staying in the same place,
Yes.
but that allows you to see through clouds and fog and mist or whatever, and to land in conditions where regular human eyesight isn't able to pierce those misty veils,
Yes.
and be able to ship that. But that's augmented. You haven't quite gotten to creating a synthetic, or you haven't gotten to creating a synthetic world. You're actually tying it into the physical world.
Yes.
But augmenting what you actually see there.
And there's often talk, and if you go to conferences and things, the talk about particularly about AR is that it's giving you superpowers, because there you talked about that kind of X-ray effect of being able to see through the cloud, for instance, to see where the runway is, or to see inside a piece of machinery to see what's going on via the instrumentation on it, and that is X-ray vision. It's not using actual X-rays, but it's giving you that extra
effectively
power.
X-ray vision. Yeah. Well, it actually, you brought up what is that, the other piece of this, which is the Internet of Things aspect. You talked about looking into machines. Well, the ability to understand what's going on in an environment with augmented capabilities now gives the ability to take a look at what we can understand about things that are otherwise hidden in the physical world.
Yes, and my stock phrase here, which I've written hundreds and said hundreds of times, I think, is augmented reality is the user interface for IoT. So when you consider IoT instrumentation, particularly here I'm talking industrial applications and things like that, you've got a piece of machinery that has got extra IoT instrumentation on it that says this bit is moving this quickly, this part of the machine is this hot, this part of the machine is vibrating this amount. You've got all this kind of contextual extra data that's telling something about what's going on with that machine. Now, a lot of that gets used for kind of analytics and AI processes like predictive maintenance to understand the minutiae of what's going on and what you might need to do to fix it before it breaks. So that's a computing level use of IoT. But if you then send an engineer to fix that machine and you start giving them the actual information from the IoT devices, and you're pinning it to where those devices are on the actual machine. So it says this is this temperature, this wire is live, this is moving this quickly, this is the first bolt that you have to undo, so that you can see those things in a AR display whilst you're hands free, so you can use your hands to perform the actions you need to fix the machine. Then you're then getting the benefit, an extra benefit of that IoT stuff, even if it's just telling you where the machine is. If you're new and it says you've just gone to a new factory somewhere and you've got a fixed pump number 73, they might not be in numerical order, and you need a map. You need something to tell you where it is. If it can guide you to it, if the headset or the AR tool can guide you to it, then you're saving time, and because it knows where it is.
And we're getting to that point. You talk about superpowers. I hark back to the movie The Matrix, in which you can download whatever the particular skill is. While we're not jacking into people's brains, we are giving them the ability to know and understand more about the task that's at hand in ways that I think really would appear to be a superpower or magic, as we've often referred to technology innovations. But the ability to now you get task-specific information that goes beyond what we normally know or understand, and the ability to understand in more depth what the actual situation is that sits before us. I
think so. Clearly, I would suggest that most people have been trying to fix something at some time. Something mechanical or something on a computer, anything. There's lots of things that break and need fixing. And one way is to find the manual and read through it and read the instructions. The other way is to look at maybe there's a better annotated manual that's got some pictures, maybe some photos in it. Another way is to go and find a YouTube video of somebody doing it. And that provides you a lot more contextual information than trying to figure out what the words are if you're not familiar with the device. But then if you could take what that video was or what that person had done, if they'd recorded it as spatial information that could be played back spatially and overlaid onto your device, then you get there a lot quicker. Now, my example of this, I didn't get to do it in AR, but there was the filter was jammed in the dishwasher. First world problem. But the how to take out the filter and what to do, I found a YouTube video, because when I was reading the instructions, I couldn't see enough. I couldn't get my head in. I couldn't figure out what it was. But seeing this video of an engineer doing it and saying, put the spoon in here and click this bit, I could then just go and do it. But if I'd had that immediately to hand whilst I was looking at it and it was pointing at it in my field of view, then I would have done it a lot quicker.
And here's the tab you click. Here's how you pull this off. Here's where it sits. Well, and again, we're maybe getting towards that. But the question, I guess, is what's the point? How do we get to a point at which we've got enough information to be able to understand that? Because it's, a big part of this is understanding what the problem is. So, in the dishwasher, the filter got jammed. But how do you diagnose, what are the symptoms and how do you actually figure that out? And this is, we've talked in the past about digital twins. If you had a digital twin for the dishwasher, you could simulate the filter getting clogged and go, that's what I saw because the water backed up right there. And this is what that looked like. And in fact, then be able to see, well, if in fact I fix the filter, here's what's going to happen. It's going to drain the water and all will be well. And you've got the ability to understand how you actually go about solving the problem. But that's that next stage, which is now virtualizing the actual internal workings of the things that we're actually working with.
Yes, there's several things. When you hit digital twin, that's an ultimate goal, and that's where you get the full spatial information, 3D model information, and the IoT information kind of fused into something. This is an operational digital twin rather than the design twin that creates it in the first place, or as you said, that kind of what if simulation. But you've got a live model of the machine that you're engaging with, or the thing that you're engaging with. Now, all sorts of processes can be applied to that. As you said, there's simulation of finding how all those problems occur in the first place, or, as we already mentioned, predictive maintenance, which is already kind of in the loop, if you like, in the IoT data. That helps identify. That's a core thing, that it can help identify problems and what's going on and just what's the state of it. Now, a lot of AR things at the moment and VR things are hand-built, custom kind of models just for that one particular task. So you might just go out with an AR headset on and record yourself fixing the machine, and that captures all that information. So then that becomes like a work order associated set of instructions and tasks, like if you went and just photographed something or videoed something. Or you've got AR, which is just presenting somebody, I say just, it's still very good, but presenting somebody with remotely with a view of what you can see. So it's show what I see. So you get remote support from somebody else. You have no idea what's going on. You point the camera at it and say, "What's this?" They look at it because they're the expert and say, "You need to fix this bit," and kind of annotate your screen.
Push that tab, do that. Yeah.
So they
over
exist.
The shoulder, and over the shoulder, phone a friend, I guess.
Yeah, and they're very often done on, it works on a phone. It's designed. You don't have all this stuff we're talking about. You don't always have to have fancy headsets. But when you get to properly engineered digital twins, and this is all part of digital engineering, when you get to a properly engineered digital twin that represents everything in a factory, from the tiniest component to the entire supply chain coming in and out, it can be at any level of abstraction. That then acts as the source of truth, if you like, for your AR experience when you're on the shop floor, because you arrive at the machine, you're effectively engaging with the physical machine and digital twin at the same time, because they're in sync, because it's a twin. If you're then going to do some training, maybe even if it's what to do in an emergency in the entire factory, then you've got a model of the factory that you can then engage with with a VR headset on, and you can walk around the factory and dash to the fire exit and kind of get that muscle memory and rehearsal where it is. And so it's all predicated on that twin existing and kind of coming together, rather than, say, at the moment there's lots of kind of custom build apps to say, we'll build you a VR training app for XYZ, or we'll say go out and record some AR stuff for you, or you record it yourself with your engineers. And so the way these things are authored, and the core content that they're going to be based on is going to shift over time. Because at the moment, companies don't suddenly give you a 3D model of the machine that you bought. They give you an instruction manual. But they will start to give you a 3D model of the instrumented machine, so you have a digital twin.
So does that mean that digital twins are really the bridge between the world of augmented reality and virtual reality? Is that what helps us get across that divide?
Well, it becomes the core asset that everything else is based on, because it is the thing. If that's everything about your factory, what's coming in, what's going out, where everyone is, what's working, what's moving, what's spinning, that becomes a data asset that can be used. You might just query it and say, how many widgets are we making an hour? But equally, you might say, well, predictive maintenance might say, or even prescriptive maintenance might say, you need to go and fix this thing, and point to it, and you can see it because you've got a visualization of it. So that whether you engage with that with VR or AR or flat screen web or a KPI alert on a board, it's all from that kind of notional data model, if you like, that sits there. And that's why, and we're going to get the metaverse word in here, aren't we? That's why when you've got...
Now you've said it. Oh, Ian, you've done it. Now we're into the metaverse.
We have to be. This is the hard end of and the solid end of metaverse. So we've talked about all kind of metaverse, but this is industrial metaverse. So the digital twin is the record of truth of what's happening. That's everything, where it is, what shape it is, how fast it's moving. And you've got people engaging with that and engaging with one another. So that is a virtual world environment, which is a metaverse application, if you like. And obviously you're not going to all be able to wander into everybody else's factory, unless you should be. but that means you can kind of effectively teleport in, another superpower, teleport in people from suppliers and third parties or clients or whatever to your factory, because you've got one.
Well, and that's the thing, actually, we'd mentioned in a past discussion, which is the ability to not only do that for an existing environment, but to do that for an environment that it doesn't yet exist, and or in situations that don't exist, which I think was the other angle. You talked about emergency training. How do you understand, how the world works when things go wrong? And you don't want to have to go burn down a building to show people what actually having the building burned down was going to look like. But you want to make sure people are prepared for that. And within that virtual environment, you can go create situations that you couldn't create otherwise, that would be too hazardous, too costly, to be able to manage that in a way that is going to be more real, is going to be closer to the kind of experiences you'd get beyond that. But that also extends to, we're building a new factory, we're extending the factory we've got, we're shifting the assembly line to have new tools and capabilities. Here's how it will work, and get people actually working with it, understanding what the human factors aspects are. We put these machines too close together, we can't get this bin of parts in between them. All of those aspects that we could sort out before you actually commit to doing it in the physical world.
Well, there's the training, as you say, that VR is particularly good for those kind of training elements, because particularly when something doesn't exist, as you said there, you can't easily do, or you can't augment the thing that isn't there. So if you have to create it completely virtually, you might present it in augmented reality, but in virtual reality, you are spending time at that place, and of whether you're in entertainment space, or whether you're in fire training or safety situations, you do remember where you've been. And there's something about having everything you see and everything you hear, and every turn and move of your head or your body is actually changing the view, just as it does with the physical world. That is incredibly powerful, because that's how we've grown up. That's how we've evolved as humans, to take in things in that way. And so that's why VR is particularly good for training, because you have done it. You have been there. Now, it's not
actually been in, right? You've been in the situation and been able to experience it in the way in which you would in the real world situation.
Yeah. And there are countless examples of that working. And I've experienced VR things since, I think, first put the headset on sort of late 80s, 1980s, not 1880s, 1980s. and I still remember where I was.
If it's that far back, maybe we're dealing with the virtual representation of Ian here.
Well, you might be. You never know. We do live in a simulation, don't we? But the
Your
elements
digital twin is awesome.
Absolutely. Well, the thing about VR particularly is that when we go in to train in an environment and we get everything we need from that environment because it's virtual, that's the same process that's being used to train autonomous robots in areas such as factories or even cars and things. And we've kind of talked about that before. They perceive the virtual environment in exactly the same way as they perceive the physical environment. So to them, robots start in virtual reality, and then they kind of come out into physical reality where it's kind of augmented for them. Whereas we start the other way around. We start in physical reality and drop ourselves into virtual, and we all get benefits from it. And because it's graphics and because it's headsets and because it's sort of geeky stuff still and closely associated with gaming and with the games industry, it's so often assumed that it's somehow not proper stuff. It's not proper computing. But if you look at an industrial metaverse simulation of a factory that is working, every single bolt is simulated, every single thing that's moving is simulated. And it's yet to be built. So that, as you said, you're kind of prototyping the factory. You're making sure that and your staff go in and see where they're going to work and whether they can reach things and things like that. All that, it's insane to not do that, isn't it? Why wouldn't you do that?
You've got the ability to do it.
Yes.
I guess that gets us to that question of, if we're considering these magic or superpowers or what have you, how should organizations be coming at this? It sounds like what you're saying is that organizations really should be considering that they've got the ability to build effective superpowers. What are the things they should be looking at for the inroads to be able to put this to work in their organizations, to get beyond that thought of, it's just, this is video games. This is not something that's not for us. It sounds like, in fact, it's pretty broadly applicable for a whole range of different environments.
Yeah. Well, taking the kind of VR example, VR headsets are not ridiculously expensive from an enterprise point of view. There are headsets that are several $100s, and it's cheaper than a phone, isn't it? Really, I mean, and so those things can have. It might be a custom build for it, but you might be able to build a training application, or you might just be able to use VR to engage with fellow employees when you're not in the office, because you get that sense of space and being there and stood next to people that you have in that kind of general metaverse style virtual world. But when you're in VR, I mean, you don't have to do those in VR. That's the other thing. They can be done on screens. But when you're in VR and you turn your head, then somebody's to your right, they are to your right. And if you move around, and if something's behind you, you can point and say, look at that thing behind you. All that kind of human interaction thing can sit there. And the applications exist to do that for those kind of office environments. And the headsets exist. And there are companies that have bought tens of thousands of headsets to help onboard employees so they get to know one another because they're all working from home. So that's kind of one branch, if you like. But then the AR side, there are applications that just sit on smartphones and tablets that help do that remote video support that I mentioned. So see what I see, and can you do the markup for me? And so when the initial COVID lockdowns happened, there was a massive spike in downloads of those remote support applications, and a lot of them became free to use, just as the video applications did. And there was a lot of use of it, and some of that was people helping their family and helping friends, but a lot of it was going to be companies and enterprises going, well, can we do this a bit different? Because we can't be in the same place at the same time, because we can't travel and we're all locked down. So that doesn't require, most people have got phones. Most companies they might give employees phones. The infrastructure's there. You have people who help one another, so you can just engage with that. Now, just doing that's kind of the entry level AR approach. And once you start doing that, it's like saying, well, if you're going to point to that thing for me and we've got some instrumentation, then can we have the instrumentation piped in here? So then you maybe use a slightly more advanced one of these helpful things to say, well, here's your IoT instrumentation, maybe just presented on screen, not necessarily locked into the world, but here's some extra. And then you say, well, it'd be helpful, wouldn't it? Because I'm getting benefit from that, but if it could point to where it was. So you then kind of move to the next level. And whilst all this is happening, the headset manufacturers and the AR industry are going through iterations and getting better. and new headsets will come out and new things will come out, and you're already used to performing these tasks. So then when you start using maybe, and the headsets get to that kind of VR cheapness, then it becomes, instead of buying the phone, you buy the headset. The field worker goes out, does their work quicker, more efficiently.
And we evolve with the technologies and the capabilities that you start to step through that.
Yeah, and you don't have to wait. It's not all the stuff. A lot of the complex stuff for AR is built into iOS and into Android. There are stacks of software in there to use the cameras on the phones and tablets to understand the world, to understand where a flat surface is, and that there's toys and games and things that you can use that start to use those. And there are moves to create in fact, there's lots of systems for it for kind of spatial tagging of things, so that you can leave something in the physical world and somebody else can get to it. So you can leave a marker.
Identify that here's the thing.
Yes.
And be able and to have confidence that in fact that's where it's located, so that you can hand it off to someone else. Yeah.
Like a virtual version of Google Earth, for instance. I mean, you kind of, that's a mapping, and Street View, that's a mapping of the world, but it's a static one.
But and to be open to thinking about the fact that if you could have the ability to be able to do that virtual to physical connectivity, what would that open, and what would that start to enable? As you say, this is something that it's relatively simple kinds of things that we're starting to tackle today, but yet it's these foundations that help to build upon much more powerful approaches to build on as we integrate greater capabilities and bring this technology into more practical use.
Absolutely, and there's also, should add that it's, whilst I said we're talking often about headsets, and people don't necessarily want to be putting things on their head, and that's a point of friction that's quite understandable. 3D TV and stuff, you have to put glasses on, so nobody wanted to watch it eventually because it's annoying.
It's one extra thing to have to mess with. Yeah.
But some of this stuff will get into our sort of normal form factor. So it's just a normal pair of glasses. A lot of us wear glasses. There are contact lenses being developed that help give information onto the contact lens for people. It may just be part of your normal contact lens rather than having to just get the gimmicky contact lens out over time. I mean, this is, we're talking decades here. But there are also different types of display other than our flat LCD. I mean, it used to be CRT, but now they were all LCD and OLED displays. There are light field displays and various other forms of, in the arena of holographic displays, but particularly light field displays. They create a depth in a very different way and it doesn't require 3D glasses. It is actually light coming out of the machines or out of the screen. So there's a screen, but the thing that you're looking at is in front of the screen. And it's physical. It's
projected from the screen that you actually see in front of it.
And everyone can see it from their perspective. So you're kind of at a different form of AR, if you like, because you're bringing those assets out into the physical space. And if you combine that, or you use, there's kind of elements of projection and things like that can change an environment around you. And we're not quite in holodeck territory yet, in the kind of Star Trek terms, but if you imagine being able to not have to wear glasses and things are projected into your environment so that you can see them and anyone else can see them if you want them to when they walk in the room, that's an extra level of comfort. I mean, that will just happen when the next screen you buy. You don't have to go,
right? You get to step beyond the headset kind of experience but still get a lot of those same benefits of the projected environment.
Yeah, and that will happen.
Well, alongside many things that we hope will happen sooner rather than later. But this has been great, Ian. Thank you for all the time into digging into this, really looking at some of the more interesting aspects that are now becoming just that much more real. There is so much more to talk about in this whole area, but at least we've covered an angle of this. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's been fun as usual. Thank you very much.
Well, and many more things to talk about as we go forward. So certainly not the last either. But that is it for this episode of Next in Tech. Thanks to our audience for staying with us. And thanks to our production team, including Carolyn Wright, Katerina Yakoviello, Ethan Simon, our intern, Michael Asaolu, on the marketing and events teams, and our studio lead, Kyle Cagnolosi. I want to remind our audience that it's also time to start thinking about the 451 Nexus conference in October, where we'll be back in person and talking about so many of the things that we talk about here on the podcast. I hope you can join us in Las Vegas. And I also hope that you will join us for our next episode, where we're going to be discussing the blockchain aspects of decentralized finance and Web3. We're going to go from one buzzy topic to another, DeFi and Web3 and NFTs and all those aspects with Alex Johnston. So I hope you will join us then, because there is always something next in tech.